good way.
Yep. Perfect.
Yay. Awesome. Well, guys, we're super excited to be here with you. Thank you so much, Tracy, for the opportunity to meet everybody and talk with everyone. Thank you for the introduction. So before we get started, we're obviously going to expand on that video a lot today and just tell you guys a little bit about who we are and what we do, how we work, what makes us different as a DMC for Italy, and how you can work with us on that basis. But before we get started, I just want to tell you guys a little bit about us and give you some background on how we got started. So as you can tell, I'm not Italian. So I was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. And my wife here, Karen, is from Italy. She was born and raised here in Rome. And she was going to school in the States, which is where we met when she was on a visa there. And basically, we got married, had a couple of kids, and this whole LBR experience, this journey for us started back in 2018 when she was starting to teach her Italian students, because she was teaching Italian online, about more off the beaten path, authentic and immersive experiences. Really, this was born out of a passion that we both have for sharing the culture and traditions of Italy with people that have a completely different perspective and through the lens of mass tourism. And we wanted to find ways of connecting them with real locals and real people on the ground, people that we had come to know through our own travels in a little bit of a more intrepid way, but in a way that was approachable. And so this is how LBR came to be. And over the last 6 years, it's been an incredible journey of discovery, of creativity, and of partnership. And so we're super excited to share that story with you guys. We now live here in Rome. So we're in a little town called Cerveteri. We're about 35 to 40 minutes outside of Rome city center. But it's a great home base for us. It's a great home base for our team. So most of our employees are here in Italy. And we'll get to that in a second. So the picture that you guys are seeing, oh, and just one more thing, guys, as we're going through this presentation, please feel free to use the chat feature to ask any questions that you have. This is going to be pretty interactive. We have a fairly small group today, so it'll be easy for us to field your questions as we go. That'll be a little bit of an easier format. So please don't hesitate to raise your hand, ask a question. Your mics are all activated, so just unmute yourself. If you have something you want to say, just go ahead and speak up and do so. So this is a picture of our beautiful team. We have grown a little bit since then. This was actually taken back in December in Sardinia during our team retreat, which is where we really get together and creatively work on the business and talk through all of our journeys and all of our experiences throughout the year and really expand on those types of things. So like I said earlier, most of us are based here in Italy. So we'll kind of expand on that. We'll get to that in a little bit. So do you want to talk a little bit about who we are?
Yeah, so who we are, we're keepers of culture and tradition in travel. Just like most of us, they got into this industry. We probably have all gotten into it because we're passionate travelers, right? We all love to travel. We particularly love to discover new cultures and even go deeper in our own cultures. Because I have to admit that ever since doing this for others, that's allowing me to go a lot deeper in the places that I grew up in, right? I was born and raised in Rome. So that's who we are. We're travelers first, passionate travelers by nature, and we love sharing those amazing experiences with our travelers.
So our mission, and one of the things that makes us unique as a DMC, has been our own travel experience. And through that travel experience, we have developed this mission of preserving culture and tradition through meaningful, sustainable, and exceptional travel. And what that means is that we're finding ways to connect these locally, like local producers, traditional artisans, back to folks back home who are curious about these kind of things. And by doing so, we're helping to preserve those traditions and keep them alive. So one of the most important aspects about how we work is our values. And I'll let Karen talk a little bit more about our values.
Yeah, so it was very important for us from the very beginning to create core values that drive every single decisions, whether it's internal for our team or with you guys, with our travel advisors, with the travelers. And our first value is what we call self-care to care. And that just simply means, we work in an industry that it can be pretty high stress. And we feel like in order for us to give our best to our travelers, to you guys, we have to make sure that we're pouring from a full cup. So we are very, intentional about our team to make sure that everybody has their time for self-care. We kind of call ourselves, we're cheetahs when we need to be, and we're sloths when we need that time to recover. We also deliver excellence, perfection. Obviously, it's something that in an industry, just by virtue of, flight delays, cancellations, last minute things, it's something that it's very hard, but we definitely strive for that excellence. And that means just being there every step along the way, solving any things that arise, especially when it comes to, flights and cancellations and things that can be pretty stressful on the client side. We also seek sustainable. So we pretty much don't work really with any big brands. We work with very boutique accommodations, which in our case can mean like 10 rooms or less, right? I know sometimes the industry standard is more around 50 rooms or less, but we work with accommodations that are locally owned, that practice sustainability. Food is biggest point, one of the biggest reasons why people come to Italy. So we want people that are growing their own food, that are preserving those traditions, and we can share them with our travelers. And ultimately, sustainable travel, it's three-way. It's people, profit, and planet. So we strive to achieve all of those. We're driven by passion and curiosity. That's pretty self-explanatory. As I was saying, we're curious travelers first. That's why we got into it in the first place. And we say play it forward. We like to keep the spirit of play alive, both internally with our team, but also in the experiences that we provide. Because again, this can be a pretty high stress, industry. And so it's important to make sure that we remember why we started to do this in the first place. And then integrity. We always strive to do the right thing.
Awesome. So a little bit about how we work, which is pretty unique. So we have a very strong emphasis on R&D. So as I mentioned earlier, most of our employees are here in Italy, and we are kind of scattered around, right? So we're in Rome. We have a couple other folks in Rome, but we have folks that are living in Sicily and Puglia, and so sort of, like Como, and so sort of spread out all over the place. And so one of the things that they're tasked with is to really dive deeper into these regions and get to know new partners that are on brand for us, and really develop those relationships in a way that can benefit the client, and then ultimately you guys as well. But one of the things that makes us unique is that if you guys have, let's say, a place in mind, or even like a restaurant or an accommodation that you're curious about, or that maybe you've heard about but haven't had the time to go, or don't know anyone that has been, and you're kind of exploring that for a client, you can reach out to us if we're a good partner for you, and we can actually start to deploy our team to make sure that we're getting that R&D for you, and that we vet those accommodations and those experiences before you put them into an itinerary, which is something that we do internally anyway. So every accommodation, guide, and experience our team has vetted personally to make sure that they are meeting the values that we just talked about, and that they're performing at that level of excellence that we expect. So we do provide turnkey itineraries. We work on Travefy, which is fantastic for those of you that are familiar with that platform. It's a very easy platform for us to collaborate with our travel advisor partners on. Obviously, there's a lot of white labeling functionality there as well. So it's just a really easy way for us to kind of go back and forth and work on the same itinerary together, make comments and things like that, ultimately leading to a more presentable itinerary for your client. So we did talk a little bit about the local managers. In addition to their role as sort of travel designers and R&D experts in their regions, they're also your client's main point of contact when they're in country. So they also serve as their full-time travel concierge. So they're the person that is there on call at all times during their trip. They're on the same time zone, sometimes in the same areas. And basically, they're there if anything needs to be changed, if there's a flight delay, if we need to book new tickets, if your client has last-minute reservations, or they have a last-minute request on the itinerary, whether it's new experience or a transfer, anything like that. Our local managers can handle that in real time and then keep you in the loop as things are happening. And then, of course, we do FAMs. That's one of our favorite parts about this business, is being able to share these experiences directly with you, the travel advisor, so that you can be more informed on, when the best time is to go. How do you actually get to these places? It's funny. It's like itineraries look great, but sometimes they're hard to translate in terms of the logistics, right? Until you've actually done them. And so we want to really make sure that we're not just going on fam trips to hop around and see as many places as we can cram into 1 week. We're actually trying to give you the exact type of experience, this sort of slow travel concept that your clients will ultimately receive, so that you can have a firsthand experience to better communicate those experiences to them. And then lastly, but not least, co-facilitating small group trips. So many travel advisors we work with are super excited about bringing groups together for travel. Oftentimes they're the ones that are hosting those groups. So we're here to help you facilitate that in terms of the itinerary design, but also in terms of the facilitation. So one of the things that we do really well as a DMC is our local managers are also phenomenal facilitators for group trips. So this is an opportunity for us to take that burden of logistics off of you so that you can focus on just connecting with your clients and really being a host to the group. So anytime you have a small group trip or anything like that, a group that you're working with on those kind of things, we can start working with you from day one on the itinerary design all the way through facilitation, booking, and execution of the trip.
Anybody have any
So
questions?
yeah, this is
on
a good
that?
time
Yeah.
to kind of pause for a second. So do you guys have any questions, any feedback on sort of how we work? That's sort of a quick summary.
We'll go into more details.
Or the chat is disabled.
Oh no, okay, wait.
Okay.
Ah.
No, click on the actual
Oh,
chat.
okay, guys, we're gonna figure this out. Wait,
Okay,
it says
say-
everyone.
Everyone, say ciao.
Let's see. Ciao.
Did you guys get that?
Mine. Oh yes, I got it. But it's still. I can't type.
You can't type. Wait a minute. It says everyone.
Yeah, the
Oh,
chat
it
is
says
just
to
on
everyone.
your side.
Wait a minute. Guys, we're gonna get this figured out. Wait, chat.
Chat, okay.
Yes.
Try now.
Okay, now we can do it.
Yeah.
You have to literally allow every
Oh my
single person
gosh.
individually.
It looks like it's
Tracy, I think we're
disabled.
gonna need a Zoom training session.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. That's okay. You guys are doing
All right,
great.
try it now. See if that works. I think you guys should be good.
Let me see.
Mm.
Nope.
No. What?
No.
Wait,
How
chat.
about Q&A? Let's try
Okay, yeah, try
Q&A.
Q&A. I
Just
know,
Can you
disabled.
get in there, Angela?
Tracy, you were able to do the Q&A.
But you
Yeah.
guys can just tell us.
That's okay. If you have
Yeah,
questions that
interject.
we can field just verbally, that's fine too. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Do you work on? Okay. Well, no,
Nope.
Okay.
Guys, it might be easier definitely to let's just chime in. If you have a question, go ahead
Yeah,
and
yeah,
ask.
that's
That might
perfectly
be
fine.
good at
So
this point.
so Julie, thank you for the question. So we just got it through the Q&A. So guys, use your Q&A
Oh,
for the
good.
questions because evidently that's what works best. So the question was, do you work on only full itineraries with hotels or do you work on one-offs? Which requests do you prefer? Do you want to answer that?
Sure. I mean, we definitely would prefer to provide the whole turnkey itineraries, right? And that's because, and again, keep in mind, we also try to give you multiple options of accommodations, but that's because we know the accommodations, we know the owners, right? We know exactly the kind of experience the client is going to have. Our guides and partners, our drivers also know those places, right? So we definitely do not do like a la carte tours. Like if you have clients that are already in Rome and you're like, hey, can we do the Colosseum tomorrow? That's not us, right? So we would prefer to provide the full scope. But again, if you already have an accommodation that you know your clients and you're like, this will be perfect for them, you can let us know. And then you can either book that yourself, right? If you have a good relationship with them and you get a higher commission, and we can still incorporate it into the itinerary and still check the reservations with them and do all of that. But definitely when you can, we would love to have kind of like full access to give you our recommendations. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. So we'll go ahead and move on here. So
This is your favorite
I
phrase.
know this is my favorite phrase. So piano, piano. And I said that terribly. Piano, piano
No,
is the phrase that people use here. And what it means is literally slowly, slowly. So it means slowing down. So one of the things that is really common in Italy is this pace of slowness and this la dolce vita, right? This like concept of, the art of doing nothing and sort of nobody's in a rush. There's not an emphasis on, living to work. It's everything. Everybody here is working to live. And so we take this concept of slowness and fostering presence and connection and community, and we incorporate that into our itineraries. And so this shows up in the form of slow travel. And so I'll let Karen elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, so we understand it's not always possible, but when it is possible, especially for travelers who may have already done it, seen it, right? They've been to the hotspots. We try to spend more time in one place. Some advisors all the time, they're like, oh, we want to get creative with Rome. We want to see where else there is. But then they're like 3 days, Vatican, Colosseum, Pantheon and Trevi Fountain. There goes your 3 days. So when it's allowed, you could spend 10 days in Rome, and we can definitely show you all the amazing hidden places in this, and not just in Rome, right? That goes for every place, any place, especially the ones that are heavier on the mass tourism, like Rome, the Amalfi Coast, Lake Como. If they can, we don't like people checking in and out all the time. Like 2 nights are really tough. As if you've done that yourself, especially via Way of Femmes, you may relate to that. So when we can, we try to spend more time in one place. We also build in free time. 8 hours walking tours of both Vatican and the Colosseum the same day, they just don't work, right? No matter how much in shape somebody else or into history, especially with a US-based clientele, one, they're not used to that type of walking, and two, it ends up diminishing the value of what they're learning, because by the end of it, they're just thinking of how hot they are, of how tired they are, and now they've become overwhelmed by the amount of information. So we typically just will do one experience in a day that it's about 4 hours. We like to give 4 to 6 hours at least a day of free time. There's of course exceptions. If somebody's on a boat all day, they're going diving, or they're going, hiking for the whole day, that's definitely different. But in terms of what they can do, especially in a city, we like to build in plenty of free time. All of our curated experiences are pretty unique. Those are not the typical things that you would just Google, right? Of course, there's not much we can do with the Colosseum and the Vatican other than providing an amazing guide. We do have access to some private tours of the Vatican if that's an interest, but those start really early in the morning. Like they have to be there like 5:15, 5:30, right? And we want to make sure that we have time for both intentional, but also spontaneous connection. Because, you can plan for an experience to be, an hour and a half to 2, but then if those people know that they have the time to let loose, it ends up being 4, right? And they end up becoming best friends with the chef they're doing a cooking class for, the cheesemaker that they are doing that experience with. And obviously, off the beaten path destinations. Again, this is usually people that are coming back for the second, third, or fourth time. But that's definitely areas that we absolutely love to serve.
Awesome. So one of the things that we talk about a lot is that oftentimes,
Keep going.
all right. Oftentimes the accommodation is the destination. And so we try and work with places that have a sense of place. So when you walk into the lobby of any place that we work with, any small accommodation, you should know exactly where you're at based on the artwork on the walls, the furniture in the lobby, the people behind the desk, and the food on the plate. Like everything in the place should actually tell a story, a unique story of that community. So we're working with places that are locally owned, that are boutique. And oftentimes people are thinking about boutique as like 20 rooms or less,
Oh,
right?
50.
50 rooms or less in some cases. The definition is kind of broad. And so we think of boutique as most of our accommodations are usually 10 rooms or less.
Yeah,
So
like
they're
this
much
lighthouse,
smaller.
it's 5 rooms in the lighthouse and an additional 4 rooms in a second building. Although it looks big, it's got the spa, it's got all the amenities of a 4-season,
Exactly. And so to that point, a lot of these accommodations, because they're boutique, they're small, they're crafted and curated by the owners hands-on, they're usually tied to local traditions. So in the case of the lighthouse, this is an actual working lighthouse from the mid 19th century. So there's a lot of story behind this, how people lived, how they worked, how it influenced the economy by bringing ships in. And at night, as the sun goes down, you can actually see the lighthouse turning on, and it still works. So you can see what people have seen coming into shore for hundreds of years. And it tells that story of that particular place and time. And so one of the amazing parts about working with these places is that we're also able to interface and interact with the owners of these accommodations. So oftentimes when your guests are staying there, they're actually meeting the owners. And so they're hearing the stories of not just the place and the community, but the people behind it that have created these amazing projects and have plugged into this sort of slow and sustainable way of tourism that has become more and more common in these off the beaten track kind of places. So that's part of what makes what we do so special, is being able to work with these incredible partners that have this amazing story that they're eager to share it with people. And so these are the type of travelers that we're looking for that are interested in this kind of immersive experience when it comes to the accommodations they stay in.
Yes. Yeah. And often those accommodations, not all of them, of course, obviously big cities can be the exception to that, especially due to availability. You can't put sometimes, people in a 6-room place, at the last minute. But a lot of the times, those places, they don't work with any other DMCs. So we literally almost have that exclusive partnerships, right, with them, which means, even higher attention to our clients. And, when our advisors or clients are going there and they talk about us and they talk about the stories, and that's how those relationships, they end up becoming long-term friends, come about. So we're very proud to be able to represent them, as they are oftentimes underrepresented.
And also that leads into a really good point of how we got to know Tracy, is that we do work with a number of the accommodations that she represents, because it often, in a lot of cases, they fit that profile exactly. So it's a really, really good partnership. Yeah.
Ah,
Stop it.
ah.
Okay, stop. Stop. Wait. All right, we got it. Okay, why did you move this over here?
Because it was covered.
Oh my
Move it to the
gosh.
back. Okay, there we go.
I'm gonna just collapse. All right, go.
Perfect. Well, you pretty much already covered this, but
Okay, yeah. So like who we work with matters just as much as the accommodation. So as we mentioned before, we're working with locally owned partners. That includes people like our drivers, right? We're not working with large tour operators. We're working with real people who we really know on a personal basis and who we've gotten to build a trusting, lasting relationship with. We also get to know their employees. So we know who your driver is going to be when they come and get you, right? And we vetted all of them. So we know that, for the most part, they speak good English, they're personable, and they're great ambassadors for the places in which they work. And they're linked to the communities in which they live. So these are the type of people we work with. And the same goes for our guides. Again, we vet all of our guides, and we're working with private individuals, local people that live in these communities. So their knowledge goes so far beyond just their vocation. A lot of times these guides build real friendships with our clients, and they're also the people that help to recommend other things to do and places to see during their free time. So that's one of the advantages of working with local people, is that they know these places more than anyone else.
well, and especially with drivers, I think what happens a lot in the industry, they hire them with big companies, they hire them during high season, and there's somebody else the next season because they obviously need to have another job in the winter. The drivers that we work with, they're usually, him, his brother, his other 2 friends and his cousin, right? And so we're able to have the same experience year after year because it's the same people. Maybe they continue growing, right? But we like to try and keep them on payroll, right? Just like we would want to do within our own company. And again, sometimes there's exception to that. Like if there's a last minute flight delayed, right? And we told you that we were going to have one driver at the airport and that driver got stuck with another client because that flight got delayed. Of course, we may send a text to your client and be like, hey, your driver is going to be so-and-so, right? So sometimes that can change, especially for like airport transfers. But for the most part, if they're having a full day on the Amalfi Coast, if they're having a full day in Tuscany, we know the driver and we've had a relationship with them for a long time.
By the way, the little old Cinquecento is not what they're driving. These are like the
No.
traditional V-Class Mercedes or the
Yeah,
E-Class.
the
Yeah, if it's a couple,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
But that's our driver.
Yeah, that's Domenico. He's the best. We love Domenico.
Okay, you do it because I'm not listening.
All right, I'm in charge of the mouse.
Perfect.
Hey, cool. I'll let you elaborate on that.
Great. So who is already, and if you have any questions, let me see, check the Q&A really quick. Okay, perfect.
Good.
But if you have any questions, just feel free to speak up. So who is our ideal traveler off season? I mean, we understand that not everybody, especially families with kids, can travel off season. And, shoulder season used to be great, like May and September, right? They used to be the shoulder seasons. As I'm sure a lot of you know, especially in the hotspot destinations, those are no longer off season. So if you have a client who does have the flexibility and is just looking for your advice, and they don't necessarily are into like water or heat or whatnot, when we say off season, we say we can do amazing trip in December, to cities, to Lake Como, to Rome, March, the Amalfi Coast. We pretty much go every year in March on the Amalfi Coast. And sure, can you catch a rainy day? Yes, just like you can catch it in May. The difference is that if you're lucky enough to catch a good day, now you got the whole coastline to yourself. So for the Amalfi Coast, right before Easter, right? is that ideal time. Otherwise, we switch back to end of October, November. So again, if your traveler has the flexibility, one time an advisor that I spoke with, they recommended their client to go to Rome in August. And I'm like, really? Because in August is when literally all Italians have holidays, so they all flock to the beach and to cooler places, and Rome is left with just, you know, travelers and tourists. And we'll talk more in future webinars about Jubilee next year and how to prepare for that. Flexible budget. Of course, we would love, you know, for people to have a flexible budget. Sometimes it's hard when there's an expectation. Okay, I want to do 10K and I want to go to Lake Como, Venice, Rome, the Amalfi Coast, you know, and Sicily. And I'm like, no, that's a different trip because you can't do all of that in 7 days. So understanding the geographic and the time that each destination really deserves. We love people that obviously want to have that cultural immersion. And even within, like the Amalfi Coast, they want to be off the beaten path, right? There is a way to actually experience the Amalfi Coast beyond Positano that is authentic, that is, you know, immersed with locals. But if they want to stay, you know, in the middle of Positano and all they care about is beautiful boutique and shops, not that that's not important, but that may not be our ideal traveler. So we rely on you, and Tracy's done a phenomenal job in kind of filtering through. Like, we don't need you to send us every single request for Italy, right? We're hoping that, because ultimately your client is going to be happy if our value proposition aligns with that value. So we're really looking to you to be that filter for us. We love to have early planners, right? Like ideally, you know, 8 months to a year, 6 months is good. Once you start getting to the 3-month range, if it's during high season, like May for August, that's challenging, right? Of course, if it's January for February, we can get it done in 2 weeks, right? Or less. And then just people that care about authenticity. Do you have any questions about who kind of our ideal traveler would be? You do it. I can't scroll. Perfect. We'll move on.
Oh, what'd you do?
Nothing.
All right. Cool. So we'll talk a little bit about our process. So before we start working with Travel Advisor, we typically ask that we do just an introductory call. And the purpose of that is just to make sure that there's a good value alignment there, that ultimately this is going to be a good fit. We want to make sure that, one, we're working with the same clients, right? And two, that we're going to be providing the value that you're looking for the type of traveler that you serve. And then for any client inquiries beyond that, so once we start deciding, you know, this is a great fit, we're going to move forward and start working together to get started on your first itinerary. We have an itinerary request form that we've curated over years of just experience with working with travel advisors, understanding some of the detail that we need to really translate those initial client conversations into an actual snapshot itinerary. And so we have a template for you to use. And once we get that from you, we'll either reach out to you with additional questions. We might ask to just jump on a quick call if we have any clarifying questions we need to get from you. And then basically from that point forward, we start kickstarting our design process.
Great. So yeah, just one more thing to add to that. If you ever want to hop on a call, we're always happy to do that. We find that a lot of advisors are busy, especially during, you know, the planning and traveling months. So we understand that it's not always feasible to get on a 45-minute call with each advisor to learn exactly about the needs. So that's why those forms are very detailed. But if you do have the time to hop on a call, we're always happy to do that and go over specifically any client request.
Yeah.
So yeah, ideally we like to have about 3 months before departure, right? And like I mentioned, there's exceptions. If it's low season, flexible budget, or off the beaten path destinations, chances are we may not need quite that 3-month leadway. Minimum budget, as a general rule of thumb, we found that for 2 people, you know, 7 to 10 days to maybe 3 destinations, it's hard to go below 15K because we're also working with the properties 4 and 5 stars, right? And most of our travelers' budget for 10 days to 2 weeks itinerary tend to range between 20 and 30,000. We quote everything in euros because sometimes we're planning a year ahead. We're getting just a deposit, which we'll get to in a second. The exchange rate may change, you know, over the next 6 months. So by quoting in euros and then converting on the day of invoicing, we just ensure that we're not overcharging, right, to account for the exchange rate, or undercharging.
And just to reiterate really quickly, once we receive that inquiry request form from you for an itinerary. Our typical turnaround for those are 10 business days.
Well, seven
seven
business days.
days.
They could be 10 if it's like, if we're in the middle of a high season and it's for next year, right? And we know for sure that we can get all of our favorite accommodations, we may ask for 10, but usually within 7 business days is our itinerary turnaround time.
Thank you. I saw 10 days right there. Threw me off. Awesome. Oh, there you go. 1 week turnaround. Okay. So
Yes.
that's exactly
Moving
what,
ahead.
yeah, that's exactly what we just talked about.
So what does a snapshot itinerary include? Again, this is for requests that have plenty of leadways, right? In the first snapshot itinerary, you're going to have accommodation choices. We typically like to give 2 or 3, right, per destination. We give you experience choices. We give you transportation, whether they've opted for private driver all the way through or rental cars. We give you city and region guides. We do not go into the start time of experiences because most of the times our experiences are flexible based on the time that traveler prefers. So those are things that we can get into details much later. Same thing with the meeting locations, contact info of all of our drivers, guides, right? And also free time recommendations. As we mentioned earlier on, we like to leave, 4 to 6 hours of day completely unplanned. For long itineraries, we may have a couple of days, if that's what also the traveler is looking for, that are completely free, right? So once we've confirmed the bookings, we go ahead and add, free time recommendations, things they can do on their own that are often free of charge. So.
Awesome. All right. So yeah, so typically we'll just talk about sort of the way that we draw out our payment schedule. So we will provide you with a gross price. This is inclusive of your commission. So we're very flexible with commission rates.
Yeah, you said it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, let's see. Do you have
Yes,
anything down there?
yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, once we provide you with the snapshot itinerary, you always see estimated total, right? And that's because we do have those accommodations, multiple options and experiences. So we're usually doing an estimation between everything that we've provided, unless there's a huge difference, right? If we're going from 4 stars to suites and 5 stars, we'll provide you with 2 different actual prices for the different type of accommodations. But it's important to understand that once the client says, okay, we love those accommodations, right? Sometimes it's, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks between the time that we send an itinerary and the time that we hear back from a client. That room category we've quoted may be gone, that price may have gone up. So it's important to let the client understand that this is an estimation. Once we collect the 30% deposit, we book, which is used to book the accommodations, then, that remaining balance is subject to change because now they're going to pick and choose their experiences, right? Like I said, maybe they choose to upgrade a room category. So it's important to know, especially early on, that they're not getting married 100% to that cost. That's why we say estimated total. And yeah, the 30% deposit is used to book the accommodations as soon as possible before everything else is confirmed.
Right. And again, we're working with smaller accommodations. So especially when we're getting closer to peak season, it's really, really important that we're able to book those accommodations first so that we have the framework for the itinerary moving forward.
Right. Yeah, because sometimes, especially in off the beaten path destinations, in Tuscany is a perfect example because it's so spread out. If we're providing an accommodation choice in the Val d'Orcia and one in Chianti, those experiences are going to be different, right? So the experiences will also shift based on the accommodation that's ultimately chosen. And then once the deposit is paid, like I said, we can take more time to have flexibility, choose the experiences. Often an advisor may request a call with us to say, hey, can you really describe in detail those experiences? So just because they're paying the deposit doesn't mean they're locking everything down, right? We're locking in the accommodation and then can still have a little bit of flexibility. This, of course, does not apply if we're like 2 months from a trip that it's during high season, right?
All right. So we typically provide 2 different payment options depending on your client, your preferences, and your own your fee schedule. So typically, our most standard payment option is we just, in addition to the 30% deposit, which is what activates the itinerary and the booking, we collect 35% 90 days before departure, and then the remaining balance 30 days before departure. The other way we go about it is very simple. It's just 30% deposit and then 70%. So the remaining balance 60 days before departure. And just just to kind of be clear, we invoice on the first day of each month. So what that means is that, let's say the final balance, let's say the date of departure is September 15th, right? That means the final balance will be due August 1st. So
For the
the
first
first
option.
of the month prior to that, on the 30 days before. So if that kind of,
Yes, and
Makes sense.
like I said, usually the first option, the 3 payments, right, deposit and then the 2 payments, works better if it's a high budget, right, and they want to
Right.
kind of, maybe this is their trip of their lifetime that they've been saving for, and they kind of want to spread out the payments. But some advisors just prefer to do 2 payments and done. We can offer payment options, especially in the case, like I said, of our bigger trips. We also, yeah, we when we plan destination weddings, that's usually the case. Okay, perfect. You'll be able to share, you ever work on a
yeah, so
special
the
trip?
question, there's a couple of questions. So the first is, do you have a sample itinerary that you'd be able to share? So Julie, yes, absolutely. We do have some of those. So we'll actually be going into that in more detail in the next webinar. So when we talk specifically about Rome, we'll be going through some of the sort of example, sort of snapshot itinerary.
But in the meantime,
type of
if you do
experience.
have a destination and, you know, we'll be happy to share a past itinerary that we've done.
Yeah.
We obviously ask, you know, that you keep that confidential, because I know sometimes things can get on forums and on Facebook and whatnot, but we'd definitely be happy to share any sample itineraries that we've done for past clients.
So the next, so the other question is, do you ever work on ancestral trips? Clients going to find more about their family roots. So this is a really great question. I'm super glad you asked it. So we actually have a genealogist on staff. She's a PhD in North Carolina, and she has worked with us for a number of years now through a program that we call Find Your Roots. And we've done this for a number of our clients now, where we actually start the consultation with her. And so she's able to start working directly with your client to compile all of the data, all of the information of where their family's from, where they live, where they need to go, where they're, you know, if they have still existing, like living relatives in those areas. And then we start to design the itinerary around that information. And so we're able to go from, you know, soup to nuts on that process.
And it's important to know that this person or team who lives in North Carolina, the reason why she's done that is because she's got Italian citizenship for her and her daughters. So that's usually why people, you know, want to also do that. It's because maybe through their great grandparents, they can get Italian citizenship, right? And unfortunately, Italy is pretty old style with technology. So we literally have to go through record books. And just as a side note, and we can go in more details in a separate call, date of death, right? Name and date of death are actually, year of death are actually super important when trying to go through those records, because we literally have to go through the court, the cemetery, the comune, and dig through books to find them. And in several occasions, we were able to take our travelers to their grandfather's graves or their house that has been now turned into a restaurant. And needless to say, it was like, you know, the highlight of their trip. So yes, great question. We can definitely go deeper into that.
Awesome.
Okay, so preparing for departure. This is very important. You know, sometimes you're planning with us so early that we'll be in touch, you know, for a couple weeks. We get the accommodations, we get the deposit, then we continue working on the itinerary, but then we may not talk for several months, right? So we then provide all of the final details, which include all of the contacts of your guides, all the contacts for the drivers in the itinerary, 30 days before departure, right? And the reason why we don't provide those earlier is because what if a guide, you know, decides to take a vacation or is sick or, you know, something happens, especially with drivers, we prefer to give all those final details about 30 days out. And then we ask that we do an internal itinerary review call with the advisor 2 weeks before. And that's so we can go through the itinerary. You can ask us any last minute questions, so you can then give those clarifications to your clients. And we can just make sure that everything is being cross-checked, you know, a million times. We have several cross-checks in our process, but it's always better and another set of eyes to go through that with our partner advisors. And then we also highly suggest that you do an itinerary review with your client about 1 week before departure. So you've had a conversation with us, it's fresh in your mind to cover any of their last minute question, and also to go through the important checklist of downloading WhatsApp, which is the preferred method of communication in Italy. And it's the way in which the local manager will be in contact with them. They can access, if they have Travelify, they can access the itinerary app. They can access documents such as train tickets, car rental vouchers and what have you. And then also their local manager does send them a WhatsApp message about 24 hours before departure. And it has happened sometimes where the local manager is trying to text them and we can actually see that they haven't downloaded WhatsApp, right? So now we're like, oh, how do they get in touch? How do the drivers get in touch and so forth? So for that review with your client, we are happy to be on it. We've done that with several advisors. We don't have anything branded, nothing says who we are, right? But we're happy to just be your local contact, and usually it's your local managers on the call with you and the client so that we can answer any of those questions, especially if it's a destination that you may have not been to or may not be as familiar with.
Awesome. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, and after, like I said, we're in touch with them throughout the entire trip. Our local managers are really good about kind of reading the client. Some clients, we check in every other day and they just send us photo, but they don't need anything. Some clients are like every day, what are we doing tomorrow, right? Or can we add or cancel this restaurant reservation? So we stay in touch with them all throughout, and our local manager also keeps our travel advisors informed. And then after the trip, it is so important for us to receive feedback. So we have both a feedback form for you, the advisor, but then we also have a traveler feedback form that doesn't have any branding. It's completely white label. So if you don't already have one that you share with your clients, we'd be happy to provide that for you in the form of a link, and then you can share it with your clients and they can fill that out themselves.
And this is really a great thing for us to bolster our partnership with you as well, because through this
Yes.
feedback, we're able to collaboratively improve our process together, talk about the things that worked well, talk about the things that maybe didn't work so well. And as we move forward, especially if we're talking about a repeat client,
Right.
find ways to improve that experience and find ways to improve the way that we communicate and we work with one another as well.
Right. Yeah. And that's not just to say, oh, everything was fantastic. The food was delicious. The accommodations were beautiful. Like, we actually want to know the small details, right? Like on sometimes we have something like, oh, in this hotel, the plugs were hidden behind the nightstand. It's not going to cost us anything to ask the hotel, hey, can you move the nightstand so that the plug is visible? But sometimes if we don't take the time to go through that feedback form, they'll say, what did you like most about the accommodation? What did you like least? It's very important for us. And,
And
we
our
take,
partners.
yes, and our partners, because we want them to continue improving as well. So yeah, we would just ask, just like we take, the time, we pour our hearts and soul into each of you and the travelers, then we would just love the extra 5-10 minutes to be able to get that feedback.
Awesome. So as we mentioned earlier, we do
We're at 10-minute
we do
marks.
work all over Italy, but these are some of the places that we work in the most. So the Amalfi Coast is definitely one of our most popular destinations. That's in great part to just the general demand in the United States for this destination. Sicily is a fantastic destination. That's probably our second busiest. And then Puglia and Sardinia. And so we have this love affair with the south of Italy. We find that there's just a tremendous amount of untapped potential for off the beaten path experiences, accommodations, and places. The price points are still relatively low outside of the Amalfi Coast, of course.
Right.
And so, but it's just this place that's really just being kind of put on the radar for most American travelers. And so it represents a great opportunity for us to do what we do best, which is connect authentic places and experiences to people back home.
Yes, but like I said, we work everywhere in Italy. Our regional manager, she lives on Lake Como. We love Emilia-Romagna and the whole food around Modena. We love Piemonte. I mean, obviously Milan, Venice. Venice, it's probably our third or fourth largest market. Tuscany as well. So we just have a personal love affair with the South, partly, the way I grew up and my family mostly being Sicilian, even though I was born in Rome, and just the level of hospitality and the value, right? If somebody is on a tight budget and they want the views of the Amalfi Coast, right? The feel of the Amalfi Coast, maybe minus the expensive shopping, go to Sardinia and you get 3 times the value, for your money. So. Oh yeah. So
also, just keep in mind that, we do send a lot of people to places that are not off the beaten path. So we send a lot of our clients to the Amalfi Coast and Rome and Florence and Venice, but within those places, within those enclaves of tourism, there are still very much authentic and off the beaten path type of experiences and places. You just have to find them. And so we've spent a lot of time curating those type of things so that they can be so that they can have access to those iconic destinations while at the same time having a more immersive and authentic stay. So oftentimes that means that in the busy season, if we have somebody approach us and say, hey, we've got a client that's going to the Amalfi Coast and they want to go in July, we might say, well, have you thought about Sardinia, right? Both for the pocketbook and for the quality of their experience, because it's not just that the Amalfi Coast is busy in July, it's hot, it's incredibly busy. They're going to end up in a car for most of the trip because they're going to be stuck in traffic. So there's all these things that you don't think about until you've gone during those times. So we try and present alternatives if we can in other areas that may be less explored or less on the radar. Yep. Awesome. So the importance of education. So education is one of the biggest pieces about what we do that is exciting to us. And so that's why we are releasing this new webinar series. This is the first of a series of webinars that we're going to be doing. The video that you guys saw at the beginning of the webinar is just an example of the types of videography and storytelling that we have been embarking on for the last 6 months with our partners. So these type of videos will also be profiling the type of partners, accommodations, and experiences that we're working with in each of these regions. So each webinar will feature a separate region or destination specifically. And in each of those series, we're going to be really taking a much deeper dive into when to go, where to stay. We're going to be telling you about our partners. We're going to be walking you through these snapshot itineraries. And we're going to be sharing that quality of content with you guys so that it's almost as good as being there. You're really going to be able to see, but you'll be able to really get the visual and the story behind these places instead of just, oh, it's beautiful. It's like, yeah, it's beautiful, but this amazing woman, Carmencita, is like opening her home to her guests and like she's making these incredible Sicilian dishes. So this is the part of the business that's really, really exciting to us. And we're super excited to share this with you guys. The next webinar is going to be on Rome and Jubilee. So we'll be talking a lot about what to expect for next year. So if you guys are interested in what you've seen today and you want to learn more about that destination specifically and learn a little bit about some of our accommodations and experiences there, sign up for this webinar. You can also find it on Tracy's website, as well as our landing page for Travel Advisor Services, which we'll share with you at the end of the slide. Anything to add there?
No, yeah, I think it's very important. Like Jubilee, if you don't know what it is, planning for next year for Rome is going to be extremely important. There's construction all over the city. We try to avoid going to Rome as much as possible, and we never know what's going to happen. So I think that's going to be a very interesting conversation to be had.
Absolutely. Yeah, and come with questions as well. So, guys, that brings us to sort of our call to action, right? So if you want to schedule an intro call, if you have an interest in sort of getting to know us a little bit more, sharing a little bit about your business, how you work, some of your clients, maybe if you have an active itinerary that you're looking at for Italy, definitely schedule an intro call with us. We'd love to talk to you and get to know you a little bit. And if you have an active itinerary request, feel free to go ahead and fill that out as well. Usually it's best that we have that first, and then we can schedule an intro call if we haven't worked with you before. That way we have some substance to talk about. So we can kind of review your request first and kind of, bring some specific questions if we have any at that point.
And that's about it.
Awesome, guys. So guys, I'm actually going to leave this page up just in case you guys haven't had the opportunity to scan it. But we're going to go ahead and take this chance to, first of all, thank you guys for your time today. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedules on a Friday to learn a little bit about what we do. Thank you, Tracy, for your partnership and for introducing us to these lovely folks. And guys, if y'all have any questions, now would be a fantastic time. And feel free to just speak into your mic.
I will keep this open.
Or use the QA, whichever is easier.
So if there are no questions, I'm going to put a link to this first webinar on my website, so you guys will be able to access it there as well. If anyone wants an intro, of course, fill out the, get that QR